Right, so it is lesson number 6 of our abstract series. So far we've been looking at some pathways and things like that, and we broke those pathways down into very simple shapes, and we used collage and acrylic to do that, and we've had some really lovely results. Now, one artist that I've always been really inspired by is Ben Nicholson. And we're going to have a look at how he looked at the landscapes of Cornwall. He also did still life, but also landscapes, which fits in very nicely with what we're doing. And he used these wonderful curved lines and geometric shapes to break up the landscape. So we're going to start off not quite going totally abstract, but we're going to have a look at how we can look at those shapes again to help break down a landscape, and then turn it into a painting which will be on some board. So hopefully you've got some board. You can use other materials as well, of course, such as some cardboard or something like that. I've got some MDF this evening, which you'll see in a few minutes, that I've used to start off the painting of some boats by a seashore. So I'm going to use those, that picture, as sort of a reference for what we're doing. The other thing I thought would be quite nice to do is experiment with sanding back through the paint towards the board so that we can get some texture into the work as well. So anyway, let's have a little look at what I've been doing and what we've got planned, and then we'll have a go. Okay, let's go over to the wall. All right, so I've got a couple of examples here of the work of Ben Nicholson. So Ben Nicholson was a significant British modern artist. He was known for abstract art, which incorporated landscapes and still life compositions. He was inspired by nature, particularly the landscapes of Cornwall, as I mentioned, and explored its light and colours in his abstract paintings. So you can see from some of these paintings, particularly this, well, actually both of them really, if I'm honest. This one just here is one that I've actually painted myself quite a long time ago as a little bit of an experiment. Now, one of the things that I really loved about this picture was the way you've got these overlapping lines and shapes around the buildings and things. So we've been looking a lot at shapes and things, so I thought that fitted in quite nicely. You can see that grey field just to the left hand side of the picture, and how it has got a shape which almost is reminiscent of the kind of thing that we've been looking at. We've got the larger shapes towards the foreground, and then as we go back we've got these elongated shapes. But then if we look at the buildings, some of the lines are overlapping through the houses. So we've got one that comes from a field at the bottom and overlaps through the house, and then we've got something that looks like a pathway in front of the white main sort of farmhouse over there as well. So and it's something that's always really inspired me, because despite the fact that it's quite precise in a way, there's also an element of this kind of freedom with the curves and the lines that overlap each other. And then this one, so as I mentioned, he's also very famous for not just doing his landscapes but doing his still lives, but we've got a bit of landscape in here as well. So we end up with these shapes, which again have this kind of translucent sort of quality to them, but there's a lot of sort of enjoyment and joy in the shapes. They're almost like being celebrated within the picture as well. So this is the kind of thing that I thought we could have a little go at. So I've got a couple of images here that I'm going to bring on, although I do have this as well. So this is one of his more abstract pieces here, but again we can see elements of still life within this picture. So we've got on the right hand side we've got a kind of a handle that curves around, and some pots and maybe a plate, and things, but again a really beautiful and textured abstract piece, which is what gave me the idea to use the sandpaper and the wax that I mentioned before. So we can see these lovely sort of weathered areas, which maybe is reminiscent of the seaside and things, you know, where the paint is wearing away as well, down there in Cornwall. So I'll just turn that one off and see if I can find the next images that I've got planned. So now I started to have a little play with this photograph. So I found lots of photographs which you can get on the drive or via the link that I put in the email. But here we've got, obviously we've got some, it's a really nice photo actually, because in the foreground we've got all these lovely nets and boxes and different fishing equipment. And then we've got two boats in the sort of mid-ground, and then towards the back of house, and then we're led through to the sea. So it's a really nice picture that I've chosen just here to work from, and indeed there's quite a few other pictures. And then what I did from there is I have done a drawing of it. Now it's not quite Ben Nicholson, I must admit, but that's something that can be developed within the painting. The idea of doing this particular drawing was to get to grips with what's in there and what the different planes and shapes are within the image. I'm not necessarily trying to be completely accurate with the shape of the boats and so forth, but I am starting to bring in some ideas in order to draw it. I've used straight lines in some cases for this wall, which frames the picture, and then some very small patterns and things in here as well. One important thing about this picture was adding the shadows. So something you may not notice from the photo is that there are some strong shadows cast by the light on the sides of the boats just there, and I recognise those as being shapes that could be a really good element or part of an abstract landscape, very much like some of the paintings that we talked about a few seconds ago. So from there I've taken the board. So this is it so far. Obviously I've not completed this one, but I'll show you the board in a second, but I've only just began to paint, it, having transferred it onto the paper, onto the board, to then start to build up layers of colour. And you can see here that I've already started to emphasize those shadows, and I'm using acrylic paint on this board, mixed with a little bit of pencil, and obviously sanding back and wax crayons and things like that as well. So a lot of fun to be had with this. So I'm going to try and make this picture a little bit more, I'm going to push those lines and maybe make those lines overlap each other, as I've started to do with the fishing kit down the bottom here, if you can see down there. So I'll show you the painting in the reel down here on my desk. So oh yes, these were the things we were doing before. So I've been experimenting with the collage and the shapes, so this all links in very nicely with what we've been doing with the Ben Nicholson stuff. So here is my photograph and my drawing, and this is my board just here. So this is a piece of MDF that I've got here, and what you can then do, of course, is start to add some textures and things in here. So I've got this very small piece of candle wax just here, so I'm gonna see if I can get in a bit closer. Blink, there you go. So I've got this little piece of candle wax here, and I haven't used any on this surface so far, but what you can do is fill an area with it. Like this. So I've now got a surface of candle wax on there. I don't know if you can see that, I can't really see that very well. And then I can choose a colour to put over the top of this. I'll just get my little bit of blue. And just a bit of water. You don't want too much water. Acrylic will resist wax crayon very well, or wax, candle wax. And then you can paint on the surface, and as soon as it's dry you can sand it back. So I'm just using this blue at the moment to do the shadow on the side of the building, on the side of the key rather. And what the candle will enable you to do as well, putting the candle wax down, is that you can then use the back of your brush or something sharper to scratch through. So on the original drawing, look, I've got these lines that are coming through there. So I'll just move this over a bit. So you can, because there's wax underneath, I can draw back into the paint, and you can do this when it's wet as well, when it's dry, like that. And that will, and then once that's dry, of course, you can sand it and you can paint the surface as well. So it's a really nice way to experiment with the paint in a new way too. Now with the sandpaper, where's my sandpaper gone? Can't find it now. Like a lot of things, they go missing on my desk. So I've got this sandpaper here. This is a Grit 100 or something. So to remove some of the paint, I'm going to try and do it on here. I've already been doing it on the surface. You can see this whole area, I've sanded that away there, and it starts to give some of that really nice texture that we were talking about with the Ben Nicholson paintings. So I've got that lovely sort of texture on there. That can be done with paint, of course, but it's quite nice to experiment with sandpaper. So we can sand away the surface to create some texture on the picture as well, like that. Okay, now I know I've skipped ahead a little bit here, because what I haven't talked about is how you get your picture on your board, but also how you then begin. So the way that I started with this is I used some watered down light PVA, and I'll try this on the other side. Just get another brush. So I got some, I said PVA didn't I, but I meant acrylic. So some acrylic that's been watered down so it's not too thick, because you don't want it to be a really solid colour. You want to be able to perhaps see some of the board underneath, so it becomes a little bit more texture. So this is almost dry brushing, which means that it's not too wet. It's quite thin, and that will enable you then to start transferring your drawing on top of this surface, and you'll be able to see it a little bit more clearly. And of course you can always sand back to add extra texture afterwards. like that. And then you can transfer your drawing onto the picture using a little bit of this stuff which we were using before. So we talked a bit about tracing. There's lots of ways of transferring, but you can, I know that's not quite dry yet, but you can put your drawing on top and transfer it straight onto the board as simplified outlines. Oh, it hasn't worked particularly well because it's very wet, but you get the idea. So you can try, that's what I did before. So you do need to wait for it to dry. I'll do a bit over here, just on the board. There we are. Okay, so that's how to transfer your drawing. So the stages of this will be that you need to first of all make a drawing, and then second of all have a board to then transfer it on. Now in the last lesson I taught in Rawn's on Friday, some of the students did say, right, I just want to get on with the board, and they literally use this to do the transfer. So took a bit of a shortcut and did this. But I think a really good thing to do is actually to spend the time drawing it, because you start to see things that perhaps you won't see just tracing it straight off of the photograph. So, and also I think I got quite an interesting angle on the boat here as opposed to the one in the photograph. I quite like it that you're looking above and you've got this lovely shape of the boat here. And whilst I was drawing, I added these curvy lines to represent the waves, and some other ideas obviously with the dashes and things. So it's a really good fun to actually spend a bit of time drawing before you start to paint. Okay, so the stages are first a drawing from your photo, and then once you've shaded it, and I'll do a bit more shade, I'll do another drawing tonight so you can get some ideas, and then once you've done that, transfer it onto your board, or paint it white first, transfer it onto your board, and then you can start painting and layering up different textures and things like that. So I know that this is probably a little bit further away for most of you at the moment, but if we make a start, we should be able to get there reasonably quickly. Okay, now let's just have a look, because I think that is quite dry now. So I'm going to see if I can get in a little bit closer here and see how that sanding works. Right, here we go. So you don't need to press or sand too hard, I don't think. Look, so I can. And the other thing you can do, of course, is if you've sanded it back and you think, well, I do like the texture, but I'd like to strengthen up another area again, then you can come back with your brush and your paint and put a little bit more colour back over the areas you've sanded, like this. And the other thing that I really like to do as well is to keep that texture but maybe change the colour slightly, is to do a glaze of colour over. That's what I call a glaze of colour back over the top. So if I've got this burnt sienna here, and get some burnt sienna just there, and just wash my brush. So I just get a little bit of that on my brush, so it's quite watered down, and then I can do a little bit of colour back over the top of that. So it's going to resist a little bit, but some of it will go into the gaps. So I get the texture alongside the change in colour, and you'll see some of the lines come back through there as well. Alright, and then later the plan is to work back into the lines, either with a pencil or you could use a pen to bring those details and make some of these lines overlap each other as well. And this is what Ben Nicholson would have done on some of his images. So Ben Nicholson, this one and this one. So some of those lines on the field were just done in pencil. And the surprising thing about this picture as well is that it is only A4 size, so it's quite small actually, but it's good fun. Okay, so does everybody get what to do? Okay, so I'm going to spend the next part of the lesson working on doing this drawing. So I was quite keen to have another go because the last drawing that I did, that you can see down in the bottom corner there, is quite stylized. In response to the work of Ben Nicholson, of course. So I thought this next picture that you can see on the screen now with the little house and the cliff would be an interesting challenge to try and create another stylized image. So you can see I'm almost beginning with very geometric shapes. Got rectangles, the odd curve, which you'll see that I remove in a short while. So a lot of the students in the classes are surprised that simplifying a picture is perhaps a little bit harder than they expected. So the reason for that being, of course, is that you've got to make quite a few different decisions when doing this kind of artwork. So if you're drawing straight from a photograph or even from something in front of you, all the details are already there. But then if you want to create something more stylized or simplified, you then have to make a lot more decisions. So it's like if I copied an artwork from Ben Nicholson, the decisions that he made are already down on his piece of work or his canvas or whatever. Whereas if you were doing something like I'm doing right now, which is working directly from a photograph but reducing it, I am making lots of decisions about which things I'm going to remove, which details I'm not going to draw in, and the method which I'm going to use to simplify the image as well. So there's much more of a decision making process here, and you can obviously get much better at making these decisions the more you practice doing this style of working, or indeed any style of work. You know, some artists spend their life doing the same kind of work over and over again, and they get to be absolutely tuned in to how they produce that style of work. So obviously I've drawn things like this in the past, and I can add in other elements and ideas to the way that I approach a piece of work when I have a go at something slightly new. So on here anyway, I decided to use straight lines for the most part. So we've got, and I'm also looking at the planes. I observed that the hill comes down, or the cliff comes right down to this precipice on the side here. I've also observed that the mountains towards the back, or the cliffs towards the back, are a bit lighter, so I've tried to emphasize that. I don't quite get as far as I wanted to with shading, but you can see I've used just lines or hatching to show the vertical drop of these cliffs as well. And the pathway, which is something else I talked about, I've just used two very straight lines to create the path, which both move towards each other as in perspective as they get nearer the house. So I've made lots of decisions about simplifying what I'm doing here, which is a lot of fun. Now this bit here where I'm doing a little bit of shading, I use a silicone tip to blend graphite together. Now you could also of course use a cotton bud, which is probably a little bit better than this, but I found the silicone tip worked quite nicely. And if you shaded an area, you can also use a putty rubber or a kneaded rubber to remove areas and add lines back in, pretty much like I did with the last one. So these lines here were to again emphasize the angle of the hill as it comes down, and then I've added some looser marks for the path. There we go. And then some further detail, but not too much, to show maybe the texture or hint at the texture of the grass on the cliffside. And then I've changed the lines more horizontal towards the back. So pretty nice stuff. I haven't drawn many pictures like this, but I can use the language and or the vocabulary or the whatever you want to call it to add in ideas. And then we've got the scribbles in the foreground to represent the rough foliage that is closer to us, and you would have seen me perhaps just put in a really thick line in the foreground to show how the hill is right in front of us here. So a little bit of shade in some different places. So sometimes you can just put in your own ideas as well. So how the angle of the roof has been extended on that house and then shaded. A little bit of fun as well. And so I was quite happy with this, and it could potentially be a nice illustration to create as well, so adding colour and so forth as well. So for the rest of this lesson, after I've done a little bit more fiddling around here, adding in some shaded areas for shadows, I then move on to adding a little bit more paint to my boat picture, which is on the board over here. So now I'm darkening, obviously you can see I'm darkening down areas, and what I'm trying to do here is pick out some of the details that I feel are interesting. So we've added some white around the shape of the boat because I love that shape, the curves in the boat. And here we've got all these crayfish boxes, or I forget what you call them, but the way all those lines and details overlap each other start to become abstract shapes on their own, very much like the picture we just saw from Ben Nicholson. So the edge of that key at the top there, I've got white in one area and then I've switched it to the blue. I'm using that same blue, so we've got a continuity through the picture to add the side of the boat, which is in shadow. So I don't do much more sanding on this. I think I do a little bit around the back of the boat later. And you can see how even after the paint is dry up there, you can still scrape into it after you've added the wax. Underneath the wax was a white, but you could paint, you don't have to paint it white, you could paint a different colour, then paint another colour over the top and scrape back through that. So the nice thing about acrylics, as I've said many times in other videos, is that acrylic's great because you can just keep working over the top. It dries really quickly, which enables you to go back and change your mind about things like colour and things and textures. You can just paint over it. It's fantastic. And here I am now putting in some yellow. Now I didn't choose yellow particularly because it's a beach scene or anything like that, because this area the boats are on is actually like a concrete. But this is more about me trying to please myself with colour. So I like the yellow next to the blue. It's kind of got that seasidey feel to it. So that's one decision that I've made there, to satisfy my own interest in what I'm doing, or my own idea of the composition. Now I don't finish this evening. I'll do a little bit more work on it the next day in another class, but I shall be working on it a little bit more next week. So we can finish these off and then perhaps go a bit more painterly in the next classes. So I hope you've enjoyed this evening, and I hope to see you in the next lesson. And if you haven't done so already, please like and subscribe and everything else. And leave a comment with any ideas you've got about painting some new pictures. Thank you. Bye.